All right, welcome to the first episode of Phlicks, the commentary that is, I hope, guaranteed to enhance your home video viewing experience. Today I'm going to be reviewing an all-time favorite of mine, and probably yours too, the 1983 comedy holiday classic, A Christmas Story, based on the written works of the late great author and satirist Jean Shepherd. Christmas Story came out in the late fall, early winter of 1983, and believe it or not, it did not do so well on its first go-around in theaters. It was actually one of those movies that did a lot better once it hit the home video market on both VHS, Betamax, and then Laserdisc. This narration, of course, is the author, Jean Shepherd. Personally, for my money, I consider Jean Shepherd to be the true original great American storyteller. His narration in this film is just perfect. And in fact, what some people might not know about this is that A Christmas Story actually inspired the creators and producers of The Wonder Years to create that show. The idea of an adult narrative looking back on their childhood really helped get the Wonder Years put into production about 5 years later. This is all filmed, at least for these downtown sequences, in Indiana. However, it wasn't called Home in Indiana, it's actually Hammond, Indiana. And Higbee's really was a store in that downtown area. The look of this film is just really well done. This was one of those films where, they really went all out in trying to get the look down to a classic 1940s era. They used a lot of classic cars from that time. There were a lot of collectible societies for automobiles that allowed the filmmakers to get all these cars that you see in this film. So pretty much anytime you see a classic car, like all these cars you're seeing here, these were privately owned cars by collectors. Here we get the full introduction of the main kids in the cast. We have Peter Billingsley, of course, as Ralphie, Scott Schwartz as Flick, R.D. Robb as Schwartz, and Ian Petrella as Randy. Of course, this would be considered totally unsanitary today. Kids pressing their faces and noses up against store windows. But what did we care back then, right? Bob Clark, of course, the director and screenplay contributor. Bob Clark, at this point, really got this film going because of the success of the teen sex comedy he had been a part of, Porky's, which was, at that time, the highest grossing film in Canada. Of course, Porky's has nothing to do with A Christmas Story. It's definitely a different film. If you've never seen Porky's, give it a look. I would say this much. For all the teen sex comedies that have been made over the last 20 years, a lot of them have Porky's to thank for that. It was a trilogy. There was Porky's, Porky's 2 the Next Day, and Porky's Revenge. And there was going to be a remake of Porky's that Howard Stern was actually going to produce, but it never happened. And in all honesty, I'm glad it didn't. Peter Billingsley, of course, at this time in his career was best known for doing commercials for Hershey's chocolate milk. He played a character named Messy Marvin, who was always getting messy with chocolate milk on his face and his clothes. And from those commercials, the popularity of Peter rose so far that the producers decide, yeah, we should put this kid in this film. He's got a great screen presence, and honestly, in this whole film, he really does well. I think at the time of this film, he was about 12 years old, maybe 11. But he really does a great job with this film. And as a kid myself, I used to remember hearing my mom saying, oh, this movie has a kid who looks just like you. But I don't know, I guess a little bit. I didn't actually start wearing glasses until I was about 6 years old, and when I saw this film for the first time, I was about 3 or 4. My mom had videotaped it off of cable, and as she tells the story, oh, he used to watch A Christmas Story all the time. He just wore out the tape, and it's true, I did wear out the tape, and eventually my mom had to buy a brand new VHS tape of it, and then subsequently I got the DVD and the Blu-ray, and it still continues to entertain me and make me laugh all the time. Here now, of course, are the Parker parents. We never actually find out their real names, but as legend has it, when Gene Shepard always wrote in the books, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, Wanda Hickey's Night of Golden Memories, A Fistful of Fig Newtons, Dad was never referred to as anything else except the Old Man. And that's pretty much how Dad is credited throughout these films. There were other Christmas Story follow-ups, but none of them really can equal A Christmas Story. And Mom, of course, was just known as Mom. So, of course, we have Darren McGavin, great actor who was best known at the time for his dramatic roles, especially on the TV series The Night Stalker. But he kind of transitioned into comedy in the late 70s. He had done a few films for the Disney Company, and he just had a look about him that made him laugh. And, of course, that was one of my all-time favorite lines. They looked at me as if I had lobsters crawling out of my ears. I've often used that a few times in life, saying, they looked at me as if I had lobsters crawling out of my ears. And Melinda Dillon here playing Mom. I think by that time, a lot of people remembered Melinda Dillon for her comedic roles as well. She had a role in the 1970s hockey comedy Slapshot with Paul Newman. All the stuff you're seeing here in this kitchen is in an actual house in Indiana, and the look, again, with what they were able to find, the look of these, say for instance in the background there, those soap chip boxes were all originals. They weren't replicas. They actually found people who collected these items, and the property department put them all throughout the house to really give it that 1940s look. And now you can actually do tours of this house. They have an actual tour that you can take of the original house from A Christmas Story. I've never been, and I would love to go. I think it would be a great opportunity to do during the holidays season. And of course, this is the moment of the tagline for this film. A lot of people say, "You'll shoot your eye out." You'll shoot your eye out. I don't know if anyone actually did have any BB gun related injuries, if you ever owned one. Let me know. Did you ever have an injury that almost caused you to shoot your eye out? Here's one of the fantasy sequences of this film. It's interesting, while this film is pretty much just a big flashback, the narrator, Ralphie as an adult, recalls these fantasy sequences, which were very cleverly produced and designed, in my opinion. Ralphie seeing himself as the great hero of his family by preventing, as he puts it, creeping marauders from entering the home. Another thing about the BB gun in this film is that it's always referred to as having a compass in the stock, and as Ralphie puts it, this thing that tells time, which, because he didn't know the proper term, it was a sundial. But if you look closely in the scenes that do feature the BB gun, there is no sundial on it. There is a compass, a very tiny compass in the stock, but there is no sundial, I hate to say. Old Blue, as Ralphie called the rifle. And these, of course, were great too. These little sparks as Ralphie shoots the guys. That was not computer generated. That is real sparks that were created by the special effects department. Of course, this was still at a time where you could say special effects, 1982-83. I know a lot of people love this next shot coming up here where all the marauders are bunched together with X's drawn on their eyes. Right there. It's classic cartoon quality. And Peter Billingsley, I heard, loved being able to spit the fake tobacco during those scenes. Now, of course, you just heard some barking there. That was just a teaser of the neighbor's dogs, the Bumpus Hounds, which you'll see a little bit later. Now, this right here is definitely one of my all-time favorite scenes, where the old man is fighting the furnace, because all the profanities that he says were, believe it or not, actually written out in the script by Gene Shepard and Bob Clark. So while you may think he's just ad-libbing these grunts, you smelly wob-drubber, dumb-vertin, hosticle fifer, those were all written. So here we go. I just gotta stay quiet for this because I love it. All written. Amazing. And of course, here's another one of everyone's favorite bits, Randy in the snowsuit. They actually padded Ian Petrella up here, so the suit is a little extra fluffier. And they created some sort of like wire device, almost like a bent wire hanger, to keep his arms elevated for these scenes. And Ian goes on record saying it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of his acting life. But it's still one of the funniest bits. That whining. Oh, God. And if you listen to him here, he almost sounds like he's laughing. There's like a little giggle there. And they spring right up. And of course, Mom's solution here is perfect. And more screaming and whining. And of course, more written dialogue as the old man fights the furnace. Now, as Ralphie and Randy leave to go to school, we get a better introduction here of their friends, Flick and Schwartz, starting with Scott Schwartz, who plays Flick. Scott had actually been doing a lot of acting prior to this film. In 1982, he starred in a comedy called The Toy with Richard Pryor and Jackie Gleason. He had done a couple TV shows. And R.D. Robb, I don't know too much about R.D. Robb before A Christmas Story, but I do know he acted into his teens and his 20s. He actually starred in the Brady Bunch movie playing the character of Charlie, one of the guys that Marcia is considering going to a dance with, but passes up and instead goes with a jock instead. But in the end, she realizes her mistake and goes with R.D. Robb as Charlie instead. Randy here struggling to get up. This actually was not completely improvised. Ian actually did have a hard time getting up during these sequences. So Bob Clark just kept saying, keep whining, kid, keep whining. But I think Ian eventually started crying, and Bob suddenly realized, oh, he really can't get up. And now here we are at school where the kids apparently love to play pranks and gags on their teacher, Miss Shields, played by actress Teddy Moore. Teddy Moore actually reappeared in the follow-up film to A Christmas Story called My Summer Story. It was also known as It Runs in the Family, and that came out 11 years later in 1994. The Billy Bob teeth. I don't know how this, became a thing, but, I guess nowadays you see people at Halloween parties dressing up as pimps and wearing, fake grills. So I guess the Billy Bob teeth kind of started it all. But as you'll see now, as Miss Shields collects the Billy Bob teeth and opens up a drawer, yes, the kids have a history of playing pranks on their teacher. The chattering teeth and the Groucho glasses, slingshots, bug-eye glasses, yo-yos, an ear with a spider on it, all in fun and pranking the teacher in the 40s. Now, of course, is the scene that I think more people talk about in this film, at least in the top 3 most talked about scenes, the tongue to the flagpole. A lot of people don't think that this was a story in the original book, In God We Trust, Others Pay Cash, and they're right. It wasn't a story, it was a radio story. A radio drama that Gene Shepard told on his old radio show on WOR, I believe it was. And he told this story of how his friend Flick was triple dog dared to stick his tongue to a flagpole. I love the facial reactions to this, like, oh, no, he did it. Yep, went right for the throat. Now, how did they do this? Well, it's very primitive, but it was effective. A little hole with air being sucked in was put into this flagpole that just, it grabbed Scott Schwartz's tongue. He had to place it in the perfect place, and of course you don't see it, but it had some give to it. You watch him, he's pulling away, and it is sticking because of the air sucking it in. It works. It actually works. You don't think he's sticking his tongue in a little hole with air sucking in. You really believe he has stuck his tongue to the pole. 1983 special effects. Why not? And of course, this goes to show the power of friendship. What's the excuse? The bell rang. Don't call for help. Just, okay, bell rang. Gotta go. And I thought, I have to admit, this was kind of, rude to see here. No one wants to speak up. No one at all. And it takes the one girl to finally point, he's out there, Miss Shields. Given the fact that it is snowing outside, Flick could have potentially froze to death. And with regards to the tongue itself really being stuck, from what I've heard, people have been known to have had, portions of their tongue actually pulled off. If you could believe that. So, if you are thinking of doing this, ladies and gentlemen, don't. It will be very painful, and you may very well lose portions of your taste buds if you attempt to do this. That fire truck, I actually found out, still exists. That fire truck is part of an antique firehouse still in Indiana that they use whenever people do tours of the Christmas Story house, and you can actually ride around in that fire engine. That was one thing I always liked as a kid. There was a local fire department that used to have an open house where, parents could take their kids to look at the fire engines, ride around on them, climb up on them, wear the fire hats and the jackets and everything. That was a lot of fun as a kid. So I think that's a nice little addition you can get if you toured the Christmas Story house. It's another one that works purely based on the facial expressions and the movements here. The way Ralphie looks around. I love that. Like, huh? What? Oh, yes, absolutely. The guilt is a much bigger punishment. Again, looking around, I love that. Peter Billingsley really, nailed it on his acting skills even before he was a teenager. I love it. And of course, that bit about, we always knew it was better not to get caught. Dun dun dun. A theme. The dreaded theme. But of course, Ralphie is gung-ho about it, with his passion for a Red Ryder BB gun. This is a classic transition you're about to see here. The iris in and the iris out, where it just closes in with a circle. Out and back in. And of course we get the theme from Peter and the Wolf's theme, to give us a teaser of the introduction of Scut Farkus. I think that laugh alone is enough to make anyone stop in their tracks. And the peeking around the fence. Scut Farkus, played by Zach Ward. The yellow eyes. But of course he did not, but that's a great line. So help me God, yellow eyes. Zach Ward is still acting. He's had quite a career post-Christmas Story. He's acted in films like Almost Famous. He's done a few sci-fi films. For a while he was on the Fox TV series Titus as Chris Titus's brother. And then Farkus's toady, as he's referred to, Yano Anea, is the actor playing Grover Dill. Now, Yano pretty much was doing a lot of acting as a child. A few years after A Christmas Story, he had a very small role in the film Better Off Dead with John Cusack. He played one of the boys in the Paperboy army that chases John Cusack. But I think one of his biggest claims to fame is that Yano actually starred in the music video for Van Halen's Hot for Teacher. He played the younger version, the kid version of Michael Anthony. Yano always says that was one of his favorite memories of childhood after A Christmas Story, starring in the Hot for Teacher music video. Here we hear about the Little Orphan Annie's secret decoder pin, but that'll come a little bit later, and that too was also from the book, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash. In this scene, there was a sequence that is referred to in the credits, but it actually was cut from the film, where Ralphie has a fantasy that he's reading a Flash Gordon comic, and he falls asleep on the bed, and he has this fantasy sequence where he's actually helping Flash Gordon fight off Ming the Merciless. And it was a huge production number that they scripted and filmed. but it just apparently took away from the enjoyment of the film, and it got cut, sadly. But if you watch the credits, both Flash Gordon and Ming the Merciless are credited. And here are the legendary Bumpus sounds. You hear about the hillbilly neighbors, the Bumpuses, in the film, but you don't actually see them until the follow-up film in 1994, My Summer Story. And of course, the old man celebrating about his major prize, and then later it's referred to as a major award. I love this here where the old man offers his leg to the hounds. And the tail. I love that. Cruelty to animals, but I love it. Another thing, if you hadn't noticed, this was actually the second time in the film where the old man's hat fell. If you watch that scene closely, when the old man put the hat on the coat rack, it fell right off. And the first time was when he walks back into the house because his Oldsmobile won't start. In anger, he throws his hat on the dining room table and it falls right off. So, two little things to look for. You can go back and rewatch the old man's hat falling. Another favorite of audiences, the scene at the table where Randy refuses to eat. It's another interesting line here that a lot of people have said, wait a minute, that's a goof. Where Ralphie says how his mother had not had a meal to herself, or rather a hot meal for herself in so many years. 15 years. And yet Ralphie in this film is probably only about 10 or 11 years old. So there's a little goof for you. Gotta love the old man's tactics to get Randy to eat that line. The screwdriver and the plumber's helper. And this is one that Ian Petrella absolutely loved to do. Mommy's Little Piggy. And the pretty much genuine laughter that you hear from Ian Petrella here, I found out was because his mom was on set and she was making fart noises. Apparently that was the noise that got Ian Petrella to genuinely laugh out loud. Another great reaction from Darren there. Again, if you look at it, Ian almost looks like he is about to cry. He is laughing so hard. And of course, the arrival now of the old man's major prize. It is here. Another great reaction here by the delivery man. He just said, I don't know. A lot of people will catch this here that it says his end up. And the famous package that is marked Fragile, which must be Italian. I found out there was another film that kind of did that same line, and it was in a Marx Brothers movie called Animal Crackers. And Groucho Marx is dictating a letter to his secretary Jamison, played by Zeppo Marx, and he says, put it in a box and mark it Fragile. Mark it what? Put it in a box and mark it Fragile. F-R-A. Look it up, Jamison. It's in the book. But that's the only other film I've heard someone make a joke about that word. But yes, Fragile, as we know it best from A Christmas Story. So, what is it that the old man could have possibly won? The box is huge, but what he actually pulls out is not all that big. And of course, all the hay and straw that gets thrown out. I think it is just straw. Yeah, it's just straw. But yeah, I love seeing that go all over the place. It's a leg. A leg. I love the bluesy saxophone background score they use here. But wait, there's more. No, it's not just a leg. A lamp. Oh, God, what a lamp. And they sell these lamps now. They've been selling them almost probably 10 years by now. People have actually replicated the leg lamp to the very littlest of details. And they are huge sellers during Christmas time. Some of them are actual size, and some of them come in a smaller desktop size, and they go in all sorts of forms. They have the actual size, they have the desktop size. People have actually made Christmas light strings featuring the leg lamp. I've seen earrings, I have seen hats. It's I guess you might call it this generation's Eiffel Tower, because if you've ever seen the Eiffel Tower in France, there are so many collectibles for it. There are keychains, there are bottle openers, there are t-shirts, there are hats. And that's pretty much what the leg lamp has become. It has become practically a national treasure that has become more than just the lamp it is. It has basically become a novelty that people love to wear, you know, be it by way of an earring, a shirt, a hat. I have to admit, I even have a t-shirt that shows the leg lamp, and it says on top, a major award. And now, we actually get a cameo from the director himself, Bob Clark. This is Bob Clark playing the character of Swede. And this is a blatantly dubbed line here. It occurs to me that the original line, instead of "Shucks, I wouldn't have known that, it looks like a lamp," might have been "Shit, I wouldn't have known that, it looks like a lamp." But being that it was mainly a movie geared towards kids, they dubbed that. Of course, Mom is completely embarrassed by this. The major award. And now we get into the radio segment of the Little Orphan Annie story. I think this was the first film to coin the phrase electric sex. Little Orphan Annie time, brought to you by Ovaltine. And of course, the mom turning the light off. This is the first of many times in which the mom tries to fight against the old man's love of the lamp by just turning it off. And that's enough to set him off. And again, we get another fantasy sequence here. Ralphie's teacher, Miss Shields, going through nothing but bad themes and finally getting to Ralphie's, and it's the be-all, end-all of all themes she's ever read. I love the hat here with the feathers. So dramatic. And of course, the way she reads it here, I love the way she, enunciates the whole bit about, and this thing which tells time. It's like that's the best line she's ever read. Sets her dreaming. I love the way Ralphie starts to blow air kisses to everyone here. And then they carry him on their shoulders. And she keeps writing the plus signs all over the classroom walls. Now, something I never noticed when I first watched this film, but I noticed it about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. When Ralphie walks back to his seat, listen very, very closely, and you will hear Scott Schwartz as Flick in the very back say, "You're a geek." I kid you not. And believe me, that was not scripted. Scott Schwartz just flat out says, "You're a geek." Right here. And R.D. Robb even kind of is surprised to hear that, and he quickly turns around. He's like, "Did you just say that?" So now we get to the scene here where we're going Christmas tree shopping. And again, the mom pulls another fast one and turns off the lamp. And of course, it just pisses off the old man more and more. He even mocks her here, saying, "Don't want to waste electricity." Blah, blah, blah. Now, the Christmas tree salesman here is another actor from Canada by the name of Les Carlson. And Les, the only other film that I have seen Les in was the David Cronenberg sci-fi horror film Videodrome from 1983 as well. So I'm not sure if Videodrome was before or after A Christmas Story. It might have been before, because I remember seeing trailers for Videodrome that were copyrighted 1982. So it's possible this was right after Videodrome. Now, if you listen to that line, the old man says, "Wait till Zoodoc sees that one." Zoodoc was a character from the books, and he was one of the old man's friends. And there's a big story in God We Trust, Others Pay Cash, where the old man goes fishing with two of his buddies, Gertz and Zoodoc. And with Ralphie with them, he's the one who goes fishing and actually catches fish. He catches over 30 crappies. So the story basically involves the fact that the old man and his friends, have gone on this fishing trip hoping to, instill some knowledge in Ralphie about how to be a good fisherman. But it's Ralphie, Gertz, and Zoodoc who end up doing all the catching, and the old man unfortunately doesn't catch any. Now here's probably one of the other top 3 scenes of this film that more people talk about than anything. The fixing of the flat tire, also known as the "Oh Fudge" scene. This was an interesting anecdote here. To this day, I still don't understand what the appeal of it is, with talking about the tires, the academic sense. It's such a random line, but I don't know why it's important. Honestly, I think that line could have easily been cut, but it's in there. So now, with regards to this sequence, a lot of people have often, wondered, did Ralphie actually say the F dash 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 word? And the answer is yes and no. They filmed two different versions. One where Peter Billingsley actually said the word, and one where he actually said fudge. And if you watch the scene where they slowly do a close-up on him, they cut just before you see the final syllable, so you never know which take they really used. But it's convincing. Here it comes. So you never know. The Queen Mother of Dirty Words. Oh boy. Now this was a very big thing back then, and maybe it still is today. I don't know, but kids didn't curse. And if you did, you were going to get it. But nowadays, like I said, kids hear and see just about anything and everything. So, maybe parents are more used to their kids dropping profanities. But no, this was really how it would be back then. If you cursed, especially in front of your parents, you were going to get it. And it's just so vulgar, of course, it has to be whispered. And the mom just loses it when she finds out. And now we get the soap connoisseur. I think someone ought to create like a fake menu for soaps. And if you're bold enough, try the Lifebuoy. Yeah! They actually sell those soap bars too, Lifebuoy soap replicas. They are, again, at the Christmas Story house. This bathroom actually does have a bar of Lifebuoy soap on display over the sink. I think it's interesting that in the rest of the film, Schwartz never, finds out who, said that he said the word, but of course Ralphie, on the edge, just blurts out the first name he could think of. And of course, it's not without logic. Schwartz is one of the few kids in the film who actually does use profanity a lot. He, kept calling Flick smartass, so another bit of screaming here. And more violence on the children. I love how even Ralphie's mom is as shocked to find out how another kid's being disciplined. It's like, I thought he would get the soap. I didn't expect this. There's another line here that my own mother used to use on me. She used to say, "Don't give me any lip," or "Don't you give me that look." So this is one my mom can relate to right here. To be a kid and being punished. Of course, Mom thinks, maybe it does have something to it. But maybe not. And these are genuine tears, I found out. Peter Billingsley, another, craft that he was good at, was crying on cue. So, if director Bob Clark said, "I need you to cry in this," Peter would just step off camera for a minute. He said, "Okay, just give me a second. Come back with the tears and roll it." And of course, the blind fantasy here. Again, Peter totally giving it his all here, playing a blind man who's selling pencils, looking for a handout. Or I guess he's not selling pencils, but that I've heard is a typical look for, someone who is completely out of work. At least back then, if they had a handicap, the only thing they could do would be to sell pencils for like $1 a piece. And of course, the dramatic reveal, how did it happen? It was... soap poisoning. And the symphonic crying and wailing by the parents. I love it. And then Ralphie, what I like about this fantasy is that he does what I call the Belushi eyebrow wiggle. As John Belushi, the late great John Belushi, used to do, these sort of, looking into the camera and doing a wave or wiggle of the eyebrows. Another iris in and iris out. So now we get Ralphie trying to push a little bit to Miss Shields to give him a good grade on his theme. I don't know if kids still do this, giving gifts to their teachers. It's a nice gesture, I think. We did a lot when I was in junior high school, and not so much in high school, but there were some teachers that I did like enough to get them a nice little gift. And of course, he's got the combed hair, looking very presentable. The same old stuff. And the grin is another big thing about Peter Billingsley. He does a lot of these grins in the film. And I think the big climactic one is when he meets Santa and asks him for a Red Ryder BB gun. But that grin, that iconic shot of him grinning at Santa Claus was used for a lot of future releases of A Christmas Story. And it's been used on a lot of the t-shirts for the film that have been made. Calendars, board games, you name it. But it's a nice, grin that Peter Billingsley had, and he used it to his advantage in this film. And now we finally get the next portion of the Little Orphan Annie story here. The secret decoder pin has arrived, and these were a thing. When you listen to the radio show of Little Orphan Annie, they had the secret circle that you could join and get this secret decoder pin. I think you can still buy these either through the Christmas Story House website, or, of course, there's online auction resources that you can get them from too. Oh, 9. Okay, so there we go. I knew he was young. I forgot what age, but that's the only time in the whole film that you hear Ralphie saying how old he is. And this announcer here was a real announcer for the Little Orphan Annie show, Pierre Andre. And this was a big thing for kids, They wanted to be the few, the proud, and the mighty who were part of this inner circle. You send away, 25 cents to $1, and, a couple, box tops from a cereal box or something, depending on what the, gimmick was, and you get these benefits as part of being part of the club. But of course, as we are about to find out, these secret messages were nothing more than... well, you'll find out in a second. There's another goof. The original E that was written was lowercase, and now it's uppercase. Now it's lowercase again. That's another thing about Randy. Throughout the books and the movies, Randy always has to go to the bathroom, and he's always whining about it, saying, I gotta go. I love the music here. They reused this actually in another adaptation of Gene Shepard's work called Ollie Hop Noodle's Haven of Bliss, where the Parker family takes a vacation at the end of the summer, and they are going on the same road over and over again. This building tension music, I love it. Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Nothing more than a crummy commercial. That was another adult moment that everyone just loved hearing in this film. And here's a funny transition joke. Randy pulls up the lid to the toilet, and then we get the shot of Ralphie pulling up the lid to the red cabbage. Some people didn't get that transition joke, but Bob Clark made sure to point it out when he had done a commentary for this film. More of the old man fighting the furnace. I should say something, though. Bob Clark, sadly, is no longer with us. Bob Clark and his son were sadly involved in an automobile accident with a drunk driver back in, I believe it was 2007. So Bob Clark, sadly, has passed away, and we do miss him. Those of us who love these films, A Christmas Story, Porky's, some other films he's done include the original horror film Black Christmas, a couple of dramatic films, and he is missed. And now we have the broken leg lamp. And of course, the old man acting as if a person has just died here. And it's got one of those climaxes that brings the house down, where, of course, he's upset over how the wife basically has been jealous, and he has to go get glue because she's used it. And when he leaves, he says something that a lot of people have wondered, what was that supposed to be? Well, I'm not going to say the word, but let me put it this way. It involves the letters M and F. And no matter how many times I hear it, I cannot stop laughing. So I'll let him say it. Not a finger. Not a finger. This is one of my mom's favorite scenes here, because if you just keep an eye on Melinda Dillon in the background, she is losing it. She just cannot stop laughing at the old man's expense. Just keep an eye on her. Here it comes. She is losing it. And the old man's just silently fuming. She tries so hard to hold it, but yep, she is eating it up, loving every minute of it. I love that he mentions, I think I heard the sound of taps being played. And now we are back to school, and once again, Scut Farkus giving them a hard time. And this is pretty much the start of what causes a big fight sequence to occur in a few scenes. And once again, Schwartz and Ralphie leaving Flick to certain annihilation, as Ralphie puts it. That was another big thing back then. If you were holding someone's arm back, you wouldn't let go unless they said uncle. I have to wonder if people still do that occasionally, but bullying, that's a terrible thing in society. And of course, the black eye. And what does Ralphie get? It is the dreaded C+. And again, more fantasy. Ralphie seeing his teacher as the Wicked Witch of the West. And of course, the P.S. You'll shoot your eye out, you'll shoot your eye out. And how he sees his mom as the court jester. Gotta love it. And Miss Shields has the Wicked Witch's laugh down to a T. Perfect imitation. But of course, this is the moment where I usually get a little melancholy, because it's at this point where you suddenly realize Ralphie has been through hell. His teacher gave him a bad grade on his paper. He's been told, he just won't get his gift that he wants. I mean, it's like, at this point now, you just feel his disappointment. He has just had it. But what could make this even worse for him? Boom. And again, Peter Billingsley was really crying during this. This is something I can definitely relate to. As a kid being bullied myself, it's like, again, you've been through so much. You've had just so much negativity and put downs. Suddenly, you just can't take it anymore, and it all just explodes. And more scripted dialogue I found out here. When Ralphie is shouting obscenities, these were all scripted. These were not ad-libbed. And Peter actually was a stickler for details on this. He tried very hard to stick to the scripted words he was supposed to say every scene they filmed of this. And of course, his friends and brother are just absolutely shocked. Like, oh my god, this is actually happening. Someone has actually stood up to the bully. And I think Flick and Schwartz are not necessarily concerned with the fact that Ralphie is making Scott Farkas bleed, but I think they're more shocked over the fact that how much profanity is coming out of him. Because again, kids didn't do this. You did not curse. And of course, Flick trying to tell him to shut up. But of course, it's Mom to the rescue. And in the book, I found out the only thing she says in this sequence after pulling Ralphie off the bully was, "What did you say?" But I think it's a lot more effective here. She just says, come on, we're going home. It's over. We're going. But again, it's like you feel just how much pain Ralphie's been through at this point. He's been bullied. He's gotten bad grades. His parents aren't listening to him. So you can relate. You can really relate to what he's been going through. But again, given the whole concept of, kids don't curse, I think Ralphie at this point is a lot more terrified, as you'll find out, of his father coming home and hearing what he said, because, it was common practice back then, apparently. Parents punish their kids, and sometimes in a physical way. Again, a true master, Peter here. Real tears. Nowadays, if people need to cry in a scene, sometimes they have menthol blown in their eyes, or they smell pepper or onions or garlic or something, anything that makes them tear up. But no, some actors had a genuine talent for crying on cue, and that's a very good talent to have in the industry. And of course, Randy coping with the situation as only he can by hiding under the sink. And again, this is all still at the Christmas Story house, and if you want to, you can actually take a picture inside that space under the sink. Of course, again, fearing the worst, Randy thinks that the old man is actually going to straight out kill Ralphie. I don't know if Ian Petrella did much more acting after this, but he's definitely very responsive to fans of the film. He has made numerous appearances at the Christmas Story house during the holiday season. He's done a bunch of autograph shows with a lot of different celebrities from TV and film. And really, I mean, if the only thing you could be known for was this film, I'd stick with that, honor. If I only did one film in my entire life and it was, being shown on television every year during the holiday season and people were quoting it left and right, I'd accept that honor. Because, it's a legacy. This is one of those films that I would definitely define as having a legacy to it. Because, like I said, between the leg lamps and the fact you can now tour the Christmas Story house and just, people who drop quotes for the film left and right, it lives on. This is another great tactic here by the mom, and this also tied into a similar story from In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, where basically Ralphie didn't want to say what had happened, and the mom just kind of briefly glosses over it and changes the topic. See, the old man's like ready to say, tell me more, but she just brings up the baseball game, or not the baseball game, a football game. I believe it's a football game. But yeah, I mean, she appeals to the old man's sense of, enjoyment of sports, and there it is. It's over. It's a very nice, sweet scene here. Because she really does care for her son. Even though she's turning, a deaf ear to his request for a BB gun, she genuinely loves her kids. So we're pretty much almost through the whole film now. And we're heading, I guess you could call this the third act, where Ralphie finally goes for asking Santa Claus for the BB gun. He figures, now I can't lose, because Santa is magical and he can make things happen. All you have to do is ask him. And again, this is downtown Indiana again. A lot of you might be wondering, what was the snow? Well, for the most part, it was soap. They used soap flakes that eventually gave off a sort of bubble effect. And there were times where the soap flakes, were getting into the kids' eyes and causing them to cry during the filming. It was stinging. So, over the years, of course, making snow in certain films has become a little bit easier. In fact, I found out that most of the film was actually filmed during the summer and not the winter. But that's how they did it back then. That's one thing I know they won't do here in Las Vegas, is have a Christmas parade, sadly. They used to have great Christmas parades in Philadelphia when I was growing up in Delaware. They would always show it on television. And Disney World, too, I remember, had an incredible Christmas parade. I really miss those days. I think they sometimes still show it on television. But yeah, that was a staple of my childhood, watching the Christmas parade on television from home. And here's another great cameo. That is Gene Shepard, the author of In God We Trust, Others Pay Cash, and really the original writer of these stories. And that was actually his wife, his real wife, in that scene as well. So you do get two cameos from the creators of this film, both Bob Clark and Gene Shepard. A lot of people love this kid. He just keeps that same expression on his face throughout the film. But Gene Shepard, a little bit about Gene Shepard, a master storyteller and satirist. This is a man who could talk to you about just about anything and everything, and you just listen. He really was the great American storyteller. And one thing I'm hoping to do at some point in my life is actually write the story of my own life. And my plan is to dedicate that book to Gene Shepard, the great American storyteller. Gene Shepard's books about Ralphie, there were about 5 books actually in that series. It all started with In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, which was basically a compilation of short stories that Gene Shepard had published in Playboy magazine in the 60s. So in that book, we are basically seeing Ralph's childhood. The follow-up book, Wanda Hickey's Night of Golden Memories and Other Disasters, was pretty much Ralph from junior high to high school. In the book A Fistful of Fig Newtons, Ralphie's stories are basically told while he's in college. And then The Ferrari in the Bedroom was basically Ralph growing into adulthood, I think from like his mid-20s up to the 30s during the 70s. And they're great books. Again, it's one thing to watch the movie which compiles the stories, but to actually sit down and read the book of these stories, that's a totally different experience. And Ian Petrella apparently was terrified of this slide. And when he goes down, he is losing it, and he is not making it up here. He is just crying. Love the actor playing Santa Claus here, Jeff Gillen. And I'm going to do a little bit of a plug here. If you'd like to see a really good reenactment of this scene here, go ahead and look up my friend and actor Brandon Hardesty on YouTube and look up A Christmas Story reenactment. he does a very funny reenactment of this scene. You're welcome, Brandon. I love this line here. Football? Football? What's a football? And of course, he finally realizes his mistake. It's like, no, wake up, stupid, wake up! And here comes that famous Billingsley grin that I made reference to earlier. And the ultimate music background here that brings it down. Grin. Ho, ho, ho. And when he lands, the look on his face kills me. Classic. And again, Ian Petrella here is just miserable from what he had to go through, and when he jumps up, he just goes right for Melinda. He's like, save me, Mommy, save me. I don't want to go down the mean old slide again. And more screaming, whining children. And another iris in and out with the decoration of the tree. I have to say, it's one of the most askew trees I've ever seen. And of course, the fuse blowing here is another great line by the old man. I love that. Don't anybody move. Another goof in this scene. They have a fireplace going there, and yet the whole room is plunged into darkness. So you can see behind Melinda there is a fire going, yet the whole place got plunged into darkness. And of course, I'm siding with Melinda on this one. That star was perfectly straight, and the old man just ruins it. Ugh. It's so pitiful. Another thing I haven't brought up too much, but I'm going to bring up now. The music in this film was composed by Carl Zitterer and Paul Zaza, I believe, were the names of the gentlemen who composed this film. And these guys actually did the soundtrack to Bob Clark's Porky's movies. So he used them again in A Christmas Story, and they do a really good job here, especially as we see the winter wonderland that is Christmas morning here. It's kind of like a nice music box arrangement here. I'm just going to stay quiet here because this is just a beautiful scene. So yeah, Carl Zitterer and Paul Zaza did the music for this film, and it just works right here. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful, and it absolutely works. Christmas morning. Again, another little goof in this sequence. You notice that the fire is going, so does that mean the fire burned all night? I enjoy seeing the old man's reaction here to the kids being up and looking at their new presents. I think my father himself was a lot like that. To be woken up so early, it's like, oh, good. All right. There's also another interesting goof here. As we see the montage of presents being opened, the old man remarks, "Didn't I get a tie this year?" But if you look very closely, in one of the portions of the old man opening a present, he has a tie wrapped around his neck, and there it is. It's kind of yellow-brownish. I think a lot of kids can relate to that, the throwing away of clothes that we don't want. And of course, the famous gift from Aunt Clara now. The bunnies. And of course, I think the only other person who can relate to the embarrassment of this gift is the old man. If you watch this, just look at Darren McGavin throughout this, because as Melinda is just gushing over the gift, he is just saying, "Oh my God, will you look at this?" He feels Ralphie's pain. He's like, "Well, you gotta do it, kid. Mom says." In case you were wondering, the old man's gift of a can of Simonize, that was it was a waxing item for cars. You would put that on their car to make it a little bit shinier. I think the original tagline was "Motorist Wise Simonize." And of course, the other great laugh here. Right on the crotch. Love that high pitch. "Thanks a lot." And what is it? A blue ball. I can imagine he probably did have a blue ball after she dropped it on him. And of course, the old man's still feeling the pain, but when Ralphie walks down in this, he just is outright shocked. Oh no. I have actually seen pictures of people who dress up as the old man puts it, the deranged Easter Bunny / Pink Nightmare on Fremont Street in Las Vegas for Santa rampages, where people dress up Christmas themed and go on pub runs all downtown. And of course, I just love the way Darren says it here. Look like a pink nightmare. And Ralphie's shaking with the askew ears. The shaking of that and the nodding, I love that. And that's another item that they do sell. The pink bunny costume, the pink nightmare. This is kind of odd for a parent to do this, offering wine to your child. No, you don't. And of course, there's just one final gift. And I love how the old man explains this. I think it's really sweet. And again, more great music here. I like that. Santa Claus probably brought it. You know, it's one thing Ralphie, I don't know if he ever really knows or acknowledges this, but I mean, according to him, it's Santa Claus who has given this to him. But in watching this scene, you realize it was the old man. And I think that's just incredibly sweet, you know? The fact is, you know, the old man has heard his son throughout the whole film, even though he hasn't had the best bond or relationship with his son. He understands this is something he really wanted, and he got it for him. That's just so sweet. I love that. You know, of course, the mom didn't think it was safe and didn't want to buy it for her son, but, you know, the old man came through in the end. And I mean, you even, you know, hear it again coming up where, you know, the mom again is showing concern, but the old man just looks at her and says, "It's okay. Look, I had one when I was 8 years old. It's okay." Love how he's gung-ho already about shooting. Nice tip from the old man. Don't shoot any birds or animals except the Bumpus's dogs. A golly Turcocanis freak, as only Gene Shepard could write it. And of course, Mom keeping him away. And of course, the ultimate irony in this whole film. He's wanted it for so long, and when he takes that first shot, what happens? Boom. Ah. I love this again with the mom catching him. All of those little moments where it's like the parents are somewhat childish in their behaviors too. Pulverized. Another bit of quick thinking here that I enjoy hearing, where Ralphie comes up with a clever plan. It was an icicle that fell off the garage. Now, of course, this is blatantly fake crying by Peter. I love how he stops briefly here. And she believes it. And of course, the old man doing the best thing he can, which is stay out of it. Of course, Randy just asleep with his Zeppelin and his blankie. And Peter is convincing, apparently enough, to his mom. Up next here, this is one of my girlfriend's favorite bits here, where the old man tries to get to the turkey and Mom says, "You stay away from that turkey, it's got an hour to cook, you'll get worms." She says that sometimes if I'm like watching her cook and trying to taste something. "You'll get worms." And I love this breaking of the fourth wall here with the smile. I used to say that myself a lot. If I told a little white lie, I would just kind of look around to anyone and just go, "I had pulled it off." Now, this was actually part of an entirely different story. The Bumpus Hounds attacking the turkey was actually part of the book Wanda Hickey's Night of Golden Memories, and it involved an Easter ham that the Bumpus Hounds wind up eating instead. Apparently, Ralphie had gotten into a fight or had pulled a prank on one of the Bumpus kids at school, made fun of him, and he told him, "I'll get you for that." And it turns out that having the hounds eat their Easter ham was the revenge that the Bumpus kid got. That's another great little bit by Darren there. "Sons of bitches, Bumpuses!" I love the return to the door. He's like, "Yeah, I'm a tough guy." And it's sad to think, other than the Bumpus Hounds, the old man was the only one in the whole family who even got to have a sample of the turkey. But instead, we get what I call the Jewish standard for Christmas, which is Chinese food. And if you look very closely, it's a converted bowling alley where the W is out, and they call it the Bowling Chop Suey Palace. And on the door it says Bowling and Sons. And I never noticed that until about a year ago. I think that's just a great gag. The Bowling Chop Suey Palace. But yes, this is a favorite of mine. Watching A Christmas Story on Christmas night and eating Chinese food. They're always open. It's perfect. And of course, it took over 30 years, but Family Guy, the cartoon series, was the first to finally point out, "That's right, America, your favorite holiday movie is incredibly racist." But no, I don't think that's the case. This is done for comedic effect, and it works. And if you don't like this scene, then don't watch it. That's the easiest way to say it. And here we get the Chinese turkey, which is a duck that, as the old man says, he's a little hesitant to eat it because it's smiling at me. And of course, again, Melinda completely losing it here. Because I think this was the first time they brought this out. They didn't rehearse this because she is just absolutely losing it. And Darren, of course, just running with it. Not laughing, he's more shocked than anything. "So how do we fix that? 1, 2, 3, chop!" Chop the head off, why not? And of course, if you look very closely, he puts the head into his pocket. Right there. And it's just hanging out there. I love it. All was right with the world indeed. Well, we're pretty much coming to a close now. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying a couple of things here. A Christmas Story in the mid to late 90s began a 24-hour marathon on network television. So people had a chance to watch this film 24 hours a day, starting at about 8 o'clock Christmas Eve and continuing till Christmas night. And many have said over the years it's been excessive, but I, for one, consider it timeless. It is just one of those films that stays with you no matter when you've watched it. As I said, I first saw this on a VHS tape back in the early 80s mid 80s that my mom taped off of cable. I wound up wearing out the videotape, bought a new version on VHS, subsequently got a DVD, and now the Blu-ray. And the legacy just lives on, and that is why I wanted to do my first Phlicks commentary on this film, because it's just one of those films that's been with me since I was a kid. As early as the age of 3 or 4 years old, A Christmas Story has been with me. And it'll be with me forever as far as I'm concerned. With me, my parents, my girlfriend, my friends, fellow fans. It's going to be with us forever. And that's really what I think, is the main point I'm trying to make. This is just a timeless film that I love, and I hope that my commentary has been entertaining. And hey, if there's a film that you'd be interested in hearing a Phlicks commentary on, leave me some feedback, send me a message, let me know. I am very happy doing these. It's one of the things I absolutely love doing, talking about movies. And whoever wants to listen will be able to. So, thank you again. My name is Phil Smith. You have been watching A Christmas Story from 1983 with Phil's Phlicks commentary enhancement. So, I wish you all the very best, and stay tuned for the next great episode of Phil's Phlicks. Merry Christmas, and to all a good night.